Karen McMahon with Pig Health today, and I'm visiting with Jeff Fetter, who is a veterinarian at Swine Vet Center in St. Peter, Minnesota. And Jeff, you are an expert on filtration, and filtration was put to the test this past year with the hot PRRS outbreaks.
I think it is a timely topic right now with all of the breaks we had last fall that continued really into June in our practice. We saw an increased incidence of PRRS breaks. And so I think one of the messages we want to get out to producers is that as we enter that time of year again, I think it is an important time to start refocusing on biosecurity if you're not already. And one of the ways we've done that is to do systematically have a system of conducting audits on farms. Whether you call it a filtration audit or a biosecurity audit, it really is a combination of those two things. We certainly do a deep dive into the filtration system at the farm, where we're inspecting the filters themselves and the pre-filters, talking about filter life and that sort of thing. But in addition to doing looking at the filters themselves, we're also spending time looking for air leaks. In the case of negative pressure farms, of course, we're trying to push all the air through the filters so that we can filter out a high percentage of pathogens. So we're concerned about air leaks. But also, we're also interested in all the other biosecurity components of a farm. Another component of that would be people entry. And so how are people entering our farms? That might include things like downtime since they've been in other farms, how people are physically entering the farms, going across benches, putting on booties, showering into the facility, things like that. Another important part of the biosecurity program would be isolation of incoming animals if live animals are entering the farm. And so we want to make sure that we're reviewing the protocol by which animals come in and how we test those animals to make sure that their health status is acceptable before we allow them to enter the farm. Feed entering the farm is another important piece of the puzzle, and there's been a lot of research done with the threat of foreign animal disease and ASF specifically in the last couple of years. There's been a lot of excellent research done looking at different ways that we can use feed mitigants to reduce that risk of feed entering farms, whether those are chemical mitigants, time and temperature mitigation, or that sort of thing. And I think the last big piece of the puzzle that we've been spending more time looking at is the piece of the manure pumping that happens in the fall, and trying to figure out how big of a piece that is to some of these disease outbreaks we have in the fall. Certainly there's two components to that manure pumping risk. One, there's the risk that neighboring farms pose as they pump manure from potentially positive farms, but there's also a risk to farms themselves as they pump, because they're potentially opening up the farm in filtered farms. That potentially creates some more risk as you open that up and allow some unfiltered air to enter the farm. And I'd encourage people to work with their veterinarians and look at some sort of program to analyze biosecurity before we get into that high risk time of year in the fall.
Are you seeing more interest in filtration now with some of these diseases and beyond sow farms?
I think we've had a lot of interest in filtration for many years, going all the way back to the first farms that started commercially filtering back in 2005 and 2006. We've had a higher and higher percentage of our sow base that we work with has been filtered every year. We would be well over half the sows we work with, and in some systems, some large systems would be up to 100% of their sows would be filtered. I do think this, as time goes on, of course, the sows and boar studs were the early adopters of filtration, but there's getting to be more interest in filtering wean to finish barns and finishing barns as time goes on, to protect those animals, and also as a buffer to keep pigs clean that are around sows and boar studs.
Do you have any recommendations for getting filtration and ventilation systems ready for cold weather?
Really, as we go into cold weather, airflow isn't quite as big of a concern with the filters themselves. But I'd say some of the things we need to do on filtered farms going into cold weather would be to focus on some of our fans that may not be running all the time, and make sure that those are getting sealed so that we don't have backdrafting of unfiltered air into farms. And in many cases, we'll add socks or outside covers on fans that aren't going to run in the winter. And that'd be one thing I think is helpful as we go into cold weather to reduce the risk of breaks on filtered farms.